How y'all doing? I'm Steph, and today I'm going through what I carry for EDC, and maybe a little bit of the philosophy as to why I carry what I carry. So, on the bench here, we have my Mini Cadet bag from Chrome Industries. I don't usually carry this particular bag all that often. It was just a good size to carry what I do carry in my EDC for demonstration purposes. But I do normally carry a backpack or a messenger bag to go to and from my university. And I do really like Chrome Industries, so I would highly recommend their products. I've heard stories of their bags lasting 10 years, and they have some really good models that have good water resistance at a pretty good price, especially if you buy it on the sales like I do. So let's get into the bag. So in the front here, this is what I actually carry every single day. Like if I leave my apartment, this is what I carry in here. So let's start with a watch check actually, because I do wear a watch every day. I used to wear Apple Watch, like the Apple Watch a lot, but I've kind of shied away from that since I've gotten into actual watches. So let's go ahead. So I have the Militato Murph Homage, or clone, whatever, wherever your stance is on that. It's just a Mecha Quartz little field watch, and I have it on an FKM rubber strap here with the clasp, and that's how I've been wearing it lately. All right, let's get into my actual EDC here. So this is the stuff I carry in my pockets whenever I go out and about. So let me just organize this here. Alrighty, so I have an alpaca wallet. Reason why I carry this wallet is because I used to have one of those canvas like slip wallets, and I was carrying some money in there, and when I looked in it, my money fell out. So now I like to have zippers on my wallet to make sure that won't happen again. So in here, I would carry a credit card, debit card, ID in here, but for obvious reasons, I won't have that on this video. But in here, it's orange on the inside, and it has two little sections in here for a little bit of organization. Always have a little bit of cash in there, just in case. You never know. I have this bottle opener because I think it's cool. And I have a sanitation wipe because they're always handy to have, and you get them free pretty much everywhere. This one was from United, and has a really nice orange interior, so you can see what's going on in there. And then in the front pouch, I usually just carry small little miscellaneous things in here, but right now I have my Sheets Rewards card, an SE survival guide thing that came with my SE Azula that I have, which, it doesn't weigh anything, and you never know. It's good to have. And also, I have a fortune in here from a fortune cookie I got way back. And it reads, "He that gives should not remember. He that receives should never forget." And, it's pretty cheesy, but I think that's a mantra that I would really like to live by, to be a generous person and then always a thankful person. So just like to keep that in there, just as a little reminder to a mantra that I can live by. Alrighty, that's my wallet. This is my earbud case. I use the Nothing Ear A. And I really like these headphones. I used to use AirPod Pros, the first gen, but I lost one of the buds and I didn't feel like paying however much money it was to replace the single bud. And the batteries were getting dead on them anyways. So instead of replacing one bud for $80, I decided to get another pair of headphones instead. It's clear, and they're not in there right now because they're in my ears as I'm recording this video. But I would highly recommend these. You know, they're a cheap pair of headphones, relatively speaking. They look pretty good, and they perform very well. I would say they're on par with my old AirPod Pros, first gens, in terms of active noise canceling and sound quality. And they have an app which makes configuring the bass, the equalizer, pairing, makes it super easy. I have this Altoids tin, and I don't have Altoids in them. I have a bit of a nicotine addiction, like many other people, and I use this to carry my Zins because it's a smaller profile and it sticks in my pocket really easily. And also, I kind of dose myself, and I only put in a couple Zins at a time, so I can pace myself throughout the day and not pop like 5 Zins in one day. As a disclaimer, don't get into nicotine. If you're not taking nicotine, don't do it. You know, it's a waste of money, and you can get by without it. But I have a relatively addictive personality, and that makes it hard for me to hop off of these, even though I know I should. You know, it's not worth the health side effects. It's not worth the monetary sink that nicotine pouches are. But for the time being, I want to make it convenient, so I have it in this little Altoids tin. And then I carry a pocket knife. So in my state, I don't think it's legal to carry automatic or assisted folders or whatever. And the blade has to be under 3 inches, which this one is. And this is the Civivi Klingman in green micarta. So it's a Nitro V steel on there. And it has a top flipper, side stud, titanium clip. And I have been using this since it was released, and I really like it. I'm not a super hard user on my knives, you know, but I think it's always pertinent to have a knife on you. You never know what you need it for, whether that be cutting some packaging or something a bit more defense-oriented, let's say. But this is a really nice knife at a pretty good price. I think they're around $60, $70. And it was in collaboration with Best Damn EDC, which is a pretty cool channel. So I really like this knife, if nothing else for the aesthetics. It's got that old trapper style look to it, which I really like. I was gonna buy a buck 110, but then I saw these on the market and I wanted to give it a try. And so far, I really like them. Now, you might see a theme already coming along. I already got 2 green items on here, and you're gonna see that with the rest of my EDC, so. And that's because green is my favorite color. So, let's get into the more advanced EDC that I carry in my bags. So this is just pocket stuff. Okay, let's just do my EDC pouch next. So this is a Viperade pouch. I got it because it was cheap, and it was in green tiger stripe camo, and I think it looks dope. And it's pretty practical, holds a decent amount of stuff. But let's get into it. So on the front here, I have the 3 pouches loaded up. Rightmost pouch, I have a teeny little Swiss Army knife. Now, I don't really use the knives. Any of these knives in here, I don't use them because I have my pocket carry, which is usually bigger and more utilitarian than any of these little knives. But it's good to have a spare knife. You never know. It has a little nail file with the flathead. And what I carry this for predominantly is the little scissors. They're sharp and they cut pretty good for their size. I also sometimes use the tweezers to get if I ever have like a splinter or something. And I don't really use the toothpick, but I'm sure you can find a use for them. Let me lay these out left to right up here. Okay. In the middle pouch, I carry a little utility knife from Walmart. And it's good to have a beater blade on you. Cutting through a lot of tape or stuff that'll gunk up your nicer knives. It's good to have this. Also has a little bottle opener and a hex bit, female part, so you can use a driver with it, which just come in handy sometimes. So that's why I carry this. It's just nice to have, and it's very slim. Okay. In the left holster on the front, I carry a little O-light, the 3E EOS. So a little cheapy flashlight, runs on AAA. It's bright enough if you ever need a flashlight and don't want to use your phone. This throws a little bit farther, and it's really small and light and cheap. I think it was like $10, so always good to have a flashlight. Now we get into this pouch up here. Like there's a divider between here and the zipper. So I carry a Uniball Signo 0.5 millimeter. So with my major, I do a lot of writing every so often, and you never know when you need a pen. And these are my favorite pens. They write super smooth, and they just feel good in the hand when writing. So that's the pen that I carry. Okay, inside the pouch, got some Carmex. Going into spring, I might not need it as much, but especially during fall, winter, it's always good to have some kind of chapstick. And Carmex does the job, and it fits in the pouch. Kind of tastes bad, but you really shouldn't be eating this stuff anyways, so good to have. Also, if your fingers or anything are getting like super cracked or chipped, this stuff will help out. Last thing in the front pouches is a little Knipex plier. Tiny, I think it's the smallest one they have, and it comes in handy. Now, I could have just used like a Leatherman in this kit, but it's really bulky and I don't use all of those tools, so I kind of spread them out. Basically, my Swiss Army knife and the Knipex kind of do whatever I need from a Leatherman, so that's the compromise that I made to make it a little bit smaller, sleeker, and lighter. And then on there I have, I forget what people call them, but like they're like a commando strip pretty much, or whatever. And this is just a bike inner tube that I cut up a little bit, and it's good to like secure stuff together. and I keep them on the pliers because they fit there pretty nice, stop them from opening too much while it's in the pouch. Okay. Now, on here I just have a tiny little carabiner. I don't really use it, but I'm sure it'd be nice to have if I need it. On the back, morale patch, just for show, you know. But underneath it, I have these little Velcro zip ties. Now, I've never had to use them, but I'm sure if I need to wrangle some cables, I'll have 3 zip ties on the back to use. And they don't add any bulk, really. So it's just a little convenience to have without any downside, really. Let's get into the back of my pouch here. I have a lighter wrapped in duct tape, one normal width, and then a little bit of thinner duct tape. And it's just nice to have some tape on hand, you know. I need to rip off this guard, but I haven't yet because I'm lazy. Good to have a fire starter. I have some earplugs in a metal canister. Now, I could just stuff these earplugs in there, but a little bit of sanitation, a little bit of separation from the rest of my stuff is good to have. You know, if I ever go to like a gun range or anywhere just particularly loud, if I'm taking a test, something like that, it's good to have some earplugs. And this little canister, you know, I can reuse that for something else if I need to. You know, carry little tiny things that might get lost in a pocket. Alrighty. Next, I have a battery. Now, this is a AAA battery inside of an enclosure that sizes it up to a AA battery. So I kind of get my bases covered. You know, I can use this as a spare for my flashlight, or if I have any electronics, it's just good to have an extra battery. And I cover the ends of the battery just to make sure no discharge or anything's happening, and it's good to have. Alrighty. I have a little pad of Post-its. Never know when you need to write a note, and you don't know if you forgot paper in your backpack, so just having a little, I think there's like 20 Post-its here. Good to have for emergency note-taking and the such. Pretty self-explanatory. Okay. I have a little allergy pill in the back of this pouch. Now, it takes up 0 space, and I have allergies to cats, dogs, tree pollen, and sometimes that's just really annoying. So it's good to have a little bit of allergy relief on the go. Okay, getting down to the last few things in here. 2 Band-Aids. Good to have, especially if you carry a knife. You know, sometimes you get a little careless and you cut yourself, or you're out and about and get a scrape. Just have some Band-Aids to cover up until you can get home or wherever and clean up really nicely. Then I have some bits with the bit extender. Now, this bit extender is like just long enough that you can use it as a screwdriver itself, but if you need a little bit more torque, that's where the Walmart razor blade holder comes in handy. You just slot that in there and you have a little bit more torque on whatever you're using. And it comes with a few Phillips, small to big, and then a pair of flatheads. It comes in handy every so often. I really don't break out the bag zipper, but I'd rather be prepared instead of, you know, scrambling around and hoping that I can use like a pocket knife to use as a screwdriver. And the last thing in this pouch is a Ziploc bag with a spork in it. I've never had to break this out, but you never know when you need an eating utensil and you don't want to use your hands. So it's just a little like camp spork, and Ziploc bag, always useful. You carry little things in there. And that is what's in my pouch. Now I have one more EDC bag that I carry in my backpacks. So let's get into that real quickly. Let me clear out this space and I'll get right back to you. Alrighty, cleared up. And let me show you my last part of my EDC that I carry. Now, this one might be a bit controversial for some people, but I carry an IFAK pretty much every day when I carry a bag. And I have a spare one as well that I carry in my car or leave in my apartment room. I just kind of shift it between my car. And that's because, you know, if someone's dying, someone's bleeding out, for whatever reason, I'm not going to get into that, I would like to have the ability to extend their life a little bit in hopes that EMT can come around and take over and hopefully get them to safety and keep them alive for the long term. Now, I wouldn't use this for anyone and everyone. This is more something I carry either for myself or like a friend. I wouldn't go up to a stranger and pull out a medical kit. I feel like that's not fully appropriate. I would probably just do hand pressure, maybe some gauze, but I don't want the liability of possibly injuring them and then getting sued or whatnot. Even though I know there's Good Samaritan laws, I'm just not fully confident in that because, disclaimer, while I am trained to use an IFAK, I am not certified. So, I'm not sure about the legality of me using this on a complete stranger. And if you want to carry an IFAK, you need to know your limitations, you need to know what you're trained to do, and just really be cognizant about how you're going to use this piece of medical equipment, or this set of medical equipment. Alright, mumbo jumbo out of the way. This bag was from Amazon. It was pretty cheap, and it has a tear-away back. So you just unbuckle this. If it was molly to a car or a backpack, whatever, you can just tear it away with the Velcro on the back. And this little patch, forget who exactly it's from, but it makes it a little more legible in case someone needs to grab it. Like, let's say I'm bleeding out from like a branch that got stuck in my arm. I can yell to my friend, hey, I have an IFAK. It has the little cross on it and red scissors. Go grab that. Yeah, but let's get into it. So on the front, you have the shears. Just the cheapo shears. And I put some gloves around it for quick access. Now, I know that in a medical emergency, your hands, the skin on your hands is thick enough that you'll probably be fine. But you never know. You know, if you have a gash on your hand or whatever, it's good to have some gloves. I have gloves dispersed throughout here just in case. Let me put these shears back in the front. And these are just super cheap, like $5 shears that'll get the job done. But, you know, if you're an EMT, I would buy some nicer shears so you can use it again and again. But this is an emergency kit. This is not a boo-boo kit. This is for if someone's bleeding out or going to hypothermia, something like that. Get into the main compartment. So in here, I have the rest of the IFAK. On the left, this is for, I carry a Mylar bag, or a Mylar blanket, space blanket, whatever you want to call it. And this is because, you know, if someone's going to hypothermia or some kind of shock, you know, their body temperature is going to drop and drop fast. So you want to keep any body heat they have in them so that they don't pass out or what have you. You want to keep their body temperature up so they have a higher likelihood of survival or better health outcomes afterwards. So it's good to have in here on the left side. Not quite as important as big bleeds, so I keep it on this side, as well as some spare gloves. And then in here, I have, so this is the Stop the Bleed kit from Skinny Medic. I haven't opened it because I'm not really sure why I haven't opened it. I think my mindset was to keep it all contained in here so it's not floating around inside of this bag. But in here, there's a Blaze Orange tourniquet, Cat 6. It's kind of the standard. Some compressed gauze. I don't use hemostatic gauze because, you know, I've done my research, and generally speaking, someone's not going to die just because you're using hemostatic gauze. Like, that's generally not going to be the thing that's going to save their lives. What's going to save their life is knowing how to roll up a power ball and stick that pressure exactly where it's needed. So I feel comfortable with just normal gauze. And hemostatic gauze is like, I think $40 versus roughly $5. And then there's I think they call them Israeli bandages or elastic bandages. So that's just after you gauze them, put the gauze into them. You can just use this to keep the pressure there if you need to move them for whatever reason, or you need to call first responders. That'll keep the pressure on while you're doing something else. And then there's gloves in here as well. So this is the Stop the Bleed kit. It was pretty affordable. It was about the same price as buying each thing individually, so I just went ahead and bought the Stop the Bleed kit instead. And then in the back here, I have some chest seals from High Vent. These are the compact ones. You know, this is not as, so if you get a puncture wound to your thoracic cavity, it's not as life-threatening immediately as, you know, bleeding, but I think it's good to have. You never know what you're gonna run into. You know, if you get in a car accident or you're in the woods and, you know, you get stabbed by debris in the chest, this will really just keep the wound clean, the area clean, and at least, if nothing else, it'll help the mental state of whoever needs this. So it's just good to have, in my opinion. And then I have an extra emergency blanket. I don't know. I'm kind of an overpacker, and this doesn't take up much space or weight, so have an extra just in case the first one tears or what have you. Multiple people are going to shock or hypothermia. Throw a blanket to each of them and hopefully help them out. Alrighty, that's pretty much all I carry in my EDCs. I know it's a bit, for a lot of people who don't carry an EDC at all, or even some who carry just a minimal EDC, this might seem a bit overkill, and I acknowledge that. It's definitely overkill, but, you know, the few pounds that my EDC kit takes up, I think it's worth, because, I want to be that person that can be relied on for whatever situation comes up. Whether that be life-threatening or just a benign, they need a screw tightened down or a piece of tape. I want to be that person who can be ready for pretty much whatever gets thrown at him. So that's kind of why I carry what I carry. Realistically, I don't use a lot of it. It's just extra weight in my backpack, but I think it's worth to have just in case I do need it. And that's a big reason why I carry the IFAKs. Not a lot of people carry IFAK. A lot of people just have little boo-boo kits, which are good to have. But if someone's in a life-threatening situation and they need to be patched up quickly to stop bleeding or stop shock, hypothermia, I want to be able to help them if I can. And the IFAK just kind of increases my ability to help, because you can make tourniquets on the fly, right? You can use strips of cloth, sticks, belts, stuff like that. You can make tourniquets, but the studies have shown that these impromptu tourniquets, they really don't help much, because you can't really MacGyver a really good solution unless you know how a tourniquet functions, how much pressure goes into these systems. So I think it's just worth to have the tourniquet with me at all times. And you can impromptu make a chest seal out of a plastic bag, or stuff wounds with cut up shirts. I think it's just better to have it's sterile, or I'm not sure if it's sterile, but it's cleaner than just a shirt that you're wearing. And every second counts when people are bleeding out or something really traumatic happens to someone. Every second counts. So the less MacGyvering, the less impromptu stuff you have to do, I think it's worth to spend the money instead, and carry the load of an extra pound or two in your backpack, that extra space. I think it's worth it every time. I don't think there's a situation where I carry my IFAK or my EDC gear, my EDC pouch, and I'm like, I regret carrying it. I never had to use this IFAK, but every time that I carry it, I know in my head that I have the ability to save my life or someone else's life. And that just gives me a little bit of confidence and, a bit of peace of mind when I'm going out and about during my days. So this is not an ad for any of these companies, whatever products I have. It's just kind of the philosophy of why I carry stuff. Because I want to be useful, I want to be helpful, and I want to be able to save people's lives when it counts. And hopefully this, gives you some inspiration, or maybe you take a look at your EDC gear and you can take some influence from what I carry. But yeah, I would 100% recommend getting trained how to use an IFAK, and then possibly carrying, if not at least having an IFAK, at least in your car or your home, just in case something happens. You never know. These things happen so quickly, and they happen randomly. So if you're not prepared, you're kind of a fish out of water. Alrighty, that's all I have for you today. Bit of a longer video. Give me some suggestions of what you want to see, and I'll try to make a video to accommodate you if it really interests me as well, because I want this YouTube channel to be something that I can share what I'm passionate about, or the little things I carry with me or have, just to like show, like, in everyday life it's super easy to get caught up in whatever, social media, the news, what have you. Every so often you just need to slow down and take inventory of what's important to you and why you have the things you have, why you spend the time you do on the things you do, and just really ponder about why you're doing that and if it's worth it. And I think a good place to start is reintroducing the intimacy of everyday objects. Anyone can carry a pocket knife, right? Or pretty much. And people just carry what they get influenced to carry, or they carry the cheapest thing they can get. And not a lot of people love their tools. And that doesn't mean, in my case, I don't use these tools a lot, but I love them. I like the craftsmanship of these things and the aesthetic, the way it feels when I carry them. And I think that's something that's lost on a lot of people. The intimacy of everyday objects, I find that's lost, especially now. So hopefully I've given you something to chew on, something to think about, and hopefully you can reconnect with the intimacy of everyday objects. And I implore you to do so. I think you'll have a much more enriched life, no matter your financial situation, no matter your emotional state. I think owning things that you love goes a really long way. I'll stop preaching and, have a great day. See you in the next one.